Unshackle me. The alien warrior promised a side of herself no one sees. The fortress rescue. The fortress of Ka then rose like a scar against Zythra's violet sky, all black metal and crackling energy shields. Vexandra Thorn crouched at the ridge line, her silver-blue skin nearly invisible against the crystalline rocks. Below, enemy sentries patrolled in predictable patterns, fools who had grown comfortable in their supposed security. She signaled her unit with a subtle hand gesture. The Shadowfang squad moved like liquid darkness, descending the cliff face in perfect silence. Vexandra's markings, the constellation patterns that traced her shoulders and arms, remained deliberately dim. She had spent 20 cycles mastering that control, learning to smother the embarrassing biological responses that had no place in warfare. The breach was swift and brutal. Energy weapons hummed and bodies fell. Vexandra moved through the chaos with mechanical precision, her blade finding targets with practiced efficiency. She felt nothing, or rather, she allowed herself to feel nothing. That was the warrior's discipline. In the detention level, she found the prisoners, 3 Zythari scouts and 1 unexpected captive. The human male sat apart from the others, his clothes torn and dusty but his posture oddly calm. He looked up as she approached, and spoke in flawless Zythari dialect. The commander Vexandra Thorn, if the legends are accurate. Your reputation suggests I'm either rescued or about to die very efficiently. Her markings flickered traitorously for half a heartbeat. No one outside her species should speak their language with such nuance, with the proper breath patterns that conveyed respect and subtle humor simultaneously. Who are you? She demanded, her voice the cold blade her enemies feared. Daniel Cross. Archaeologist. I was studying the temple ruins in the southern canyons when they decided I knew too much. He stood slowly, hands visible and non-threatening. I can help you escape through the old aqueduct system if you take me with you. Vexandra calculated quickly. The primary exits would be compromised within minutes. She needed an alternative route. Agreed. Stay close and do not slow me down. Alarms began shrieking as they ran. The escape through darkness. The aqueduct entrance was exactly where Daniel had promised, a narrow fissure behind a collapsed wall that Vexandra's scanners had missed entirely. She went first, her weapon raised, and immediately the darkness swallowed them whole. The ancient tunnels stretched endlessly, carved by waters that had dried up centuries ago. I cannot see, Daniel said quietly behind her. Vexandra hesitated, then allowed her markings to brighten. The constellation patterns across her skin pulsed with soft luminescence, casting blue-silver light across the rough stone walls. She hated this, hated the exposure, the undeniable evidence of the emotional resonance system her people carried. Every Zythari knew that the brighter your glow, the deeper your feelings ran. Beautiful, Daniel murmured, and she nearly extinguished the light entirely. It is biology. Nothing more. Her voice was sharp. They walked in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. You know these passages were built during the Unity era. Your people used to celebrate emotional expression. The carvings here show. I am aware of history, she interrupted. Much has changed. Yes. War does that. His tone held no judgment, only observation. How long have you been fighting? Since I was 8 cycles old. I was selected for warrior training when my markings first emerged too bright, too responsive. They taught me control. The words escaped before she could stop them. She never spoke of her past. Daniel's footsteps paused. They saw your capacity for deep feeling and decided to suppress it. That seems backwards. Vexandra's markings dimmed involuntarily, a flicker of old pain she thought she had buried. Emotional warriors make mistakes. They hesitate. They grieve. I was taught that such weaknesses could not coexist with excellence. And did it work? He asked gently. Are you happy? The question struck her like a physical blow. Happiness was not a concept she had considered in years. It was irrelevant. Unnecessary. Yet standing in the darkness with this strange human who looked at her glowing skin with wonder instead of tactical assessment, she felt something shift inside her chest. Happiness is not the objective, she finally answered. Perhaps it should be. The ambush and breaking point. They had been traveling for nearly 2 hours when Vexandra's instincts screamed warning. She threw out her arm, stopping Daniel just as weapons fire erupted from a side passage. Enemy soldiers, a tracking unit that had followed their heat signatures through the ventilation shafts. "Run," she commanded, returning fire as Daniel sprinted ahead. The tunnel narrowed, forcing them into a bottleneck. Vexandra's mind calculated odds with cold precision. 12 hostiles, 1 escape route, insufficient ammunition for a prolonged engagement. She made her decision in a fraction of a heartbeat. Vexandra grabbed Daniel and pulled him into a collapsed chamber, then positioned herself in the opening, her body a living shield. Energy bolts scorched the air around her. She fired methodically, dropping 3 attackers, then 4. But there were too many. The impact came from her left side, a plasma round that punched through her armor and seared into her ribs. Pain exploded through her nervous system, white-hot and absolute. Her markings blazed involuntarily, flaring so bright the tunnel lit up like daylight. She stumbled backward into Daniel's arms. "Vexandra!" His voice sounded distant through the roaring in her ears. She fired her remaining shots blindly, triggering a structural charge she had set at the tunnel entrance. The explosion brought down tons of rock, sealing them in but blocking their pursuers. Dust filled the air. Her weapon clattered from her hands. The pain was secondary to the horror she felt as her markings continued to flare beyond her control. Decades of discipline shattered in an instant. The patterns across her skin swirled and pulsed with colors she had spent her entire life suppressing. Deep blues of sorrow, violet streaks of fear, and beneath it all, a golden warmth she did not recognize. "I cannot control it," she gasped, sliding down the wall. Her armor felt suffocating. Everything felt too close, too real. Daniel knelt beside her, his hands gentle as he assessed her injury. "Stop trying to control it. You do not understand." Her voice broke, a shameful crack in her warrior's composure. "This is weakness. This is failure. I am supposed to be." "Unshackle me," she whispered, the old Sci-fi phrase for releasing one's deepest truth. Tears she had not cried since childhood tracked down her face. "I will show you the side of myself no one sees." And her markings exploded into unprecedented brilliance. The promise of shelter. Daniel had seen many beautiful things in his travels across the galaxy. Nebulas birthing stars, ancient temples carved from single crystals, bioluminescent forests that sang in the wind. But nothing compared to Vexandra in this moment, her defenses finally fallen, her skin ablaze with light that told stories words never could. The golden warmth he had glimpsed earlier now dominated the swirling patterns, interwoven with threads of silver longing and deep blue vulnerability. Her markings moved like living art across her shoulders, down her arms, tracing the curves of her face. She trembled, whether from pain or the overwhelming release of suppressed emotion, he could not tell. "I see you," he said softly, carefully removing the damaged sections of her armor to access the wound. "And you are magnificent." "I am broken," she whispered, her voice raw. 20 cycles of training, undone in a moment. No, Daniel pressed sterile gauze against the plasma burn, his touch impossibly gentle for someone working with injured flesh. "You were broken before. This is you becoming whole." He worked methodically, cleaning and sealing the wound while Vexandra watched his face. No disgust. No tactical assessment of her compromised state. Only focus and care, as if tending her was the most important task in the universe. When he finished, he did not pull away. His hand remained on her shoulder, warm against her luminescent skin. On Earth, we have a saying, the people who shine brightest are those who have walked through the deepest darkness. Your people allow such things? Feeling deeply and still being strong. We try to. It is not always easy, but yes, he smiled, and something in Vexandra's chest constricted in a way that had nothing to do with her injury. Strength without feeling is just violence. Strength with feeling is courage. Above them, through a crack in the collapsed cavern ceiling, Zythra's triple moons rose in sequence, pale blue, silver, and amber. Their combined light filtered down, mixing with her glow. Vexandra reached up slowly, giving him time to withdraw if he wished. When he did not move, she touched his face with careful fingers, tracing the line of his jaw. His skin was warm, softer than Zythrai skin, and unmarked by any natural luminescence. Yet somehow that made it more precious. I have never. She started, then stopped. Warriors do not. We are taught that physical intimacy clouds judgment, weakens resolve. And what do you think? Daniel asked, leaning slightly into her touch. I think I have been living in a very small cage of my own making. Her markings pulsed brighter, the golden warmth intensifying. I think I would like to discover what exists beyond it. Daniel shifted closer, mindful of her injury, and cupped her face in both hands. Then discover it. I am not afraid of your light, Vexandra. I never will be. When their lips met, it was gentle, achingly so. Vexandra had kissed before, perfunctory encounters meant to satisfy biological needs without emotional engagement. This was entirely different. This was Daniel breathing softly against her mouth, his fingers threading carefully through the shorter tendrils at the base of her skull, his heartbeat steady and sure where their chests pressed together. Her markings sang with light, patterns she had never seen before emerging and dancing across her skin. She felt exposed, vulnerable, and for the first time in her adult life, safe. They drew apart slowly, and Vexandra rested her forehead against his, her breath unsteady. I do not know how to do this. Be this. Neither do I, Daniel admitted. We will learn together. She pulled him closer, ignoring the protest from her injured ribs, and let herself simply feel the warmth of his body, the steadiness of his presence, the impossible truth that someone could witness her completely undone and choose to stay. Dawn of a new belonging. Morning came slowly to the caverns, pale light gradually replacing moonlight through the fissure above. Vexandra woke with Daniel's arm draped carefully across her waist, his breath even in sleep. Her markings still glowed softly, no longer the suppressed dimness she had maintained for years, but a steady luminescence that felt natural, right. She had spent the night alternating between sleep and conversation, learning the shape of vulnerability. Daniel had shared stories of Earth, a world without war academies that stole children, where people were allowed to feel complex emotions without being labeled defective. She had told him about the sister she had lost in training, the grief she had been punished for displaying, the decades of pretending her heart was as armored as her body. And in the quiet darkness, they had discovered each other with hands and mouths and whispered words, a slow exploration that felt like learning a new language of tenderness. Now, as Daniel stirred awake, Vexandra made her decision. We must return to the surface, she said quietly. My unit will be searching. Concern flickered across his face. If they see you like this. Then they see me, she sat up, her markings brightening with newfound determination. I am finished hiding. The climb took an hour, using the equipment from her pack. When they emerged onto the canyon floor, the sun was fully risen, and her squad was indeed waiting. 6 warriors in full armor, weapons lowered but ready, stared at their commander whose skin blazed with emotional light they had never witnessed. Lieutenant Kaya stepped forward, his own markings carefully neutral. Commander, you are injured. I am healed, Vexandra corrected, standing straighter despite the ache in her side. Daniel remained close but not hiding behind her. Lieutenant, I need to address something with all of you. Her squad assembled, confusion evident in their postures. These were warriors trained exactly as she had been, to suppress, to control, to dim their inner light for the sake of tactical efficiency. I have spent 20 cycles believing that emotional control made me stronger, she began, her voice carrying across the canyon. I have taught many of you the same discipline. I was wrong. Kaya's markings flickered with shock. Another warrior shifted uncomfortably. True strength is not the absence of feeling, Vexandra continued, reaching back to take Daniel's hand. The gesture was deliberate, public, undeniable. It is the courage to feel everything and still stand firm. To grieve our losses and still fight for what matters. To love fiercely and protect what we cherish not despite our emotions but because of them. Her markings blazed brighter, the golden warmth now predominant, interwoven with threads of conviction and hope. I am still your commander. I am still a warrior. But I will no longer pretend that suppressing half of what makes us Zythari serves any purpose except our enemies. Silence stretched across the canyon. Then, slowly, Lieutenant Kaya's markings began to brighten, just slightly, a flicker of relief and admiration he had hidden for years. Another warrior's patterns pulsed with cautious agreement. The human stays with us? Kaya asked. Vexandra looked at Daniel, whose eyes held steady certainty. He stays with me. If the Legion will have us both. Kaya's mandibles quirked in what might have been a smile. The Legion follows you, Commander. Wherever that leads. As they began the trek back to base, Daniel walked beside Vexandra, their hands still linked. She knew there would be challenges ahead, command structures to navigate, cultural prejudices to confront, an entire military philosophy to question. But for the first time in her adult life, she faced the future not as a weapon, but as a complete being. What will you do now? Daniel asked quietly. Vexandra looked at her warriors, at the brightening markings several of them now displayed openly, at the vast sky of Zythera stretching endlessly above. I will teach them what you taught me. That we are strongest when we are whole. That love is not weakness but the foundation of everything worth fighting for. She squeezed his hand, her markings singing with light. And I will discover, with you, what it means to truly live unshackled. Lessons. True intimacy requires the courage to be seen completely, without armor or pretense, trusting another person with the tender parts of yourself you have spent a lifetime protecting. Love does not diminish strength but transforms it into something more profound. The warrior who fights with an open heart protects more fiercely than one who fights with an empty one. Vulnerability is not the opposite of courage but its highest expression, for it takes more bravery to feel deeply than to feel nothing at all.